Welcome back, everyone, to the series on winning angles in sports betting. This is an introductory series about how to identify good bets in the marketplace. Next up on the list of winning angles is mispriced parlay correlation. Now, maybe the first question you have already is, wait, I thought parlays are sucker bets. Well, that is at least a little bit unfair. If you actually have a quantified edge that you've modeled out, there can be some utility in parlays, but that'll be for a different video. What is fair to say, though, is that parlays are the sportsbook's best friends and their favorite type of bets by far. For one very good reason: they increase the betting volume of recreational bettors who, by and large, are losing bettors. So before we dive into this example a little further, let's take a look at two classic types of parlays. The first example is what you could call an off-the-board parlay, where you have two or more legs on logically independent outcomes. Take, for example, betting the over points in 3 NFL games on whatever random Sunday. What happens in one of those games really has no bearing on the outcome of the other games. They are independent, they are not correlated to each other. The second type of parlay is what you could just call a correlated parlay, and it's just the opposite, where you have two or more legs where each leg is logically related to another in some way. The most classic example of this, of course, is using the single game parlay. So let's focus on an example there. So we can understand that there may be correlation between Bills quarterback Billy Walters throwing, over 2.5 touchdowns and then the Bills winning by 10 or more points. The chance of one of those things happening makes the other that much more likely to also have happened. But the $1 million question is, how much more likely? Although it's a relatively straightforward example, the sportsbooks do have an unenviable chore of instantaneously offering such a single game parlay at a reasonable price. And it only gets trickier the more legs that you add. A couple more points to drill down here. Let's not forget that the hold on parlays is normally far higher than on straight bets. This isn't just some sinister thing that the sportsbooks do. There is a pragmatic reason for it, and that's in part due to the complexity of pricing them correctly for bettors. Think of all the possible parlayable player props that you could string together for a single game parlay on any NFL Sunday or any NBA game, whatever it may be. Focusing on the NFL, for example, the correlation between a player's total receptions and the amount of points that his team will win by or that his team will score is different for almost every relevant player in the league. And plus, the more flexibility that the books offer us, aka the more legs that you add to the parlay, the better the book's models have to be in order to get the prices right. So because the modeling of correlated parlays can be difficult, there is opportunity for bettors to exploit and for us to find good bets. As with the mispriced derivative angle that we talked about in another video, a key here is to look in the tails and potentially go beyond maybe the logical end of a lot of these pricing models. Let's revise the Billy Walters example and say the Bills are playing the Cowboys. Okay. You bet Billy Walters to throw over 1.5 interceptions and then the Cowboys to cover -9.5. This relatively simple parlay is likely a correlation that the models have figured out, right? Interceptions equals bad, so the other team is going to cover, right? Again, this at face value is a relatively simple example, and it's likely a correlation that the models have figured out. So the key here is to go one step further. If the Bills are turning the ball over, they also aren't going to be kicking field goals on those same drives. So if, for example, we then check the pricing of Billy Walters over 1.5 interceptions and under 1.5 Bills field goals, okay, well then compare that to Billy Walters over 1.5 interceptions, but over 1.5 field goals. If the correlation models are right in this example, the pricing for the under field goals option should be considerably shorter than the over field goals option. Okay, that makes some sense, but what if we take this one more logical step further? If we assume that the Bills are losing due to turnovers, the game script likely looks different than if they were winning or if it was going according to plan. Let's say that being a Bills fan or just having watched a lot of their games, that when the Bills are winning, they tend to give their first string running back, Bill Bentor, a ton of carries. Okay, well, maybe now you can check Walters over 1.5 interceptions plus the under carries for Bentor, and then compare that to the opposite, over 1.5 interceptions, but then the over carries for Bentor. The under carries in this option should be much shorter. And if it's not, then you've likely found a pricing error. As we talked about in the derivatives angle as well, the takeaway point here, guys, is that it's virtually impossible for the books to have logical working models that price everything fair or everything right correctly. There are going to be errors, and the oversights are going to be in these nooks and crannies. They're going to be in the tails, okay? But you will need to think critically and logically to find them. So next time you're thinking about building the same game parlay, think about the correlation between the options that you're adding to the bet slip. Think in the tails and continue to do your due diligence, continue to be selective. Again, guys, there's no such thing as a foolproof method. Nothing is a lock. It requires you to be selective, but continuing to work through these options and thinking logically about these bets, which is perhaps sometimes not what these pricing models are doing, will allow you to identify good bets, even if it is a parlay. All right, I hope that was a helpful introduction. Let us know what you guys think in the comments. And as always, good luck.